Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your testimony today. You just answered a lot of what I was just going to ask, but we discussed, and maybe you can answer this, we discussed methadone, Suboxone, and I'm not very familiar with this one, the Vivitrol,
Yes.
as different options. What's the difference between these three different drugs, and what would make one opiate abuser be prescribed methadone over Suboxone? Because it's my understanding that some of these treatment facilities are methadone only, some are methadone and Suboxone. And speaking from firsthand knowledge, from speaking from people in these different facilities, understanding that there is quite a difference on being on both of them.
Yeah, I think the problem is that we have these regulations. The regulations were written for the methadone clinics to control the methadone patients. You had to show up every day, you had to be dosed every day, you had to follow certain things. We did that because it was a particular segment of the population that we wanted to get out of town in the industrial section, okay? We've never changed those regs. If you take methadone, methadone has a long half-life. The reason why we use methadone is that it doesn't give a spike, it doesn't give a high. Now, if you mix it with a benzodiazepine, it does. It mimics some of the feelings that people have that use heroin. Some facilities will go out, and if you have a doctor who writes a prescription for a benzodiazepine, they'll still take the patient. A lot of the facilities now, like we've done, is that script has to be written by a mental health expert in order for it to be valid. The problem really is that everyone's different. Some people metabolize drugs differently. If you're using 15 or 20 bags of heroin, buprenorphine's still going to make you sick. Suboxone, buprenorphine is the active ingredient. It's not powerful enough to completely block the signs of withdrawal for someone who has a very heavy heroin use.
So that person then would be started on methadone then?
Correct. And the other part about methadone, I think why methadone, the rates of methadone success appear to be higher, at least initially, is they need to show up every day. So where buprenorphine, literally you can go into a doctor's office right now and get a 30-day supply of buprenorphine and walk out the door. I mean, every single person that comes into our clinic, we run them through the Medicaid checklist to see if they're a Medicaid recipient, because you can't take cash for someone that is a Medicaid recipient. They call and they still want to do that. Why? Because they want another script for this because they're selling it.
And just a quick follow-up, and you had mentioned that perhaps these prescriptions alone are not a pathway to success in being drug-free.
That's correct. You're not going to use heroin and you're not going to overdose while you're at a clinic.
Suboxone does suppress the need for opiates.
That's correct.
What's the side effects from long-term Suboxone use? I know people that have been in these clinics for years upon years upon years that have never been off. Now, they don't show any side effects. I don't know whether it's a good thing or bad thing. Is this something where you could say, okay, here's a prescription for Suboxone. I'd rather you take this the rest of your life. You may not, there may be some side effects, but it's better than you being addicted to heroin and with extremely bad side effects.
Yeah, I mean, it's harm reduction. Right now in this country, we give metformin to type 2 diabetics. Type 2 diabetes is completely man-made behavioral condition. You could exercise, eat better, and lose weight, and you don't need metformin. So when the person first comes in, that's what we tell them. If we're a family practice, we would say, exercise, eat right, get your blood sugar under control. Typically what happens, the person comes back, their blood sugar's higher. So then we give them the metformin. But we also don't say, here's the metformin, don't do anything else, right? Suboxone, I think buprenorphine, Suboxone, is a better drug actually than methadone. The problem is that they're not one or the other. It might be a situation where the person would start off initially with methadone. The problem of getting people into treatment, there's very few inpatient facilities that will allow people to continue using their medication, methadone or Suboxone. The number one problem with getting these people in the door is they don't want to go through withdrawal. They will steal grandma's engagement ring and hawk it not to go through withdrawal.
But the effects of the Suboxone, though, do you know of any long-term side effects from Suboxone use?
We don't really know that. We know this. We know that any of those drugs work on the receptors in the brain that deal with pleasure. The reason why you go into such serious withdrawal is because of the dopamine that's completely expended. I'll give you an example. If you take ecstasy, There's some studies that show that it takes a whole year after a week's worth of ecstasy for your dopamine levels to get back to normal. So typically those people are depressed the rest of the year. That's the type of thing that we see with people who try to wean themselves from Suboxone or methadone. Signs of depression. A scary thing right now, Reckitt Benckiser that makes Suboxone, which by the way our government gave them $25 million to bring it to market because we didn't think there was a market for that drug. They're now trying to get it off-label use for depression. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a scary thing. You're going to give somebody an opiate that's 10 times as powerful as morphine.
And I know there's other questions. I just want to finish up real quickly. More addictive or harder withdrawal, heroin or Suboxone?
Different people will say different things. Because we're not sure what the potency levels are of heroin, I would say heroin. And here's the thing. Even if you had a young person that was taking a SSRI, Prozac, it affects that part of the brain where there's a chemical balance. And if you just stop taking it, you started seeing teenagers committing suicide. You don't do it that way. The whole idea of the way this program works, our average length of treatment is 22 months. I'm asked that all the time. At one point in time, it was about 18. But I think what we're starting to see is that people are staying in the program longer. The ones that stay in the program and typically wean over a period of time and have all their other issues addressed, including housing, which is a huge problem, living somewhere safe where there's no other people using. 2 years? I like to tell people this: there is no cure. There's treatment, but there's no cure. I think we need to start telling kids, you're going to get hepatitis. How about that? I mean, that's probably going to kill you just as easily, if not quicker, than the opiate addiction.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm just making sure that we're not trading one addiction and just supplementing it with another. I'm trying to think if I were, trying to quit cigarettes and someone said, well, here's drug X, but to get off drug X, it's going to be more addictive than cigarettes. Well, you're really no better. You're actually in a worse place than what you started at. So
I'm concerned deeply about Vivitrol. Vivitrol is a drug that blocks, that addresses that receptor, and it blocks the effects of the opiates. And it suppresses the desire. Interestingly enough, if you take Vivitrol, the statistics in the Vivitrol packet say, take the Vivitrol for 6 months, 1 shot a month. Now the problem with that is you go 28 days, your tolerance level's in the basement. And as we know with many addicts, they keep trying to jump that. People who come into the methadone clinic will still shoot dope for a while until they realize it doesn't work, okay? But eventually, that oil in the glass, as they say, kinds of go down and the water starts going back in, right? And if you don't come back to the clinic for the next shot and you go back and use what you were using before, there's a good chance you're going to overdose and die. Well, if you treat with Vivitrol for 6 months and do the exact same counseling that you use with nothing, methadone, or Suboxone, the success rates seem to be a lot greater. And I've always asked why. I feel the belief is that it's suppressing that receptor in the brain. It's downgrading it, I'm guessing. Are those people going to be clinically depressed the rest of their life? Are they not as happy when their child graduates from high school? Are they not as, I don't know. But it's better than being dead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.